Check 1 2, check, 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 testing, testing. All right, I think we're ready. Let's talk about movies. Hi, my name is Brian Johnson, and I don't say that to trigger some great moment of recognition for you, unless you recognize my name as the special effects director for The Neverending Story, or perhaps the drummer for AC/DC. Come to think of it, my name is out there quite a lot. It's a very common name. I intend to change that. I intend to make my name world famous as best I can. I'm just a guy. I am a lifelong film enthusiast living in Central Oregon. And I do say film enthusiast instead of film buff. I am not someone who is constantly devouring the various media about film, studying film theory desperately. I don't go see every film I can ever see. I've never seen a Fellini film, even though they told us to see them in film school. I have never watched one. I just enjoy going to the movies. I think I'm probably a pretty typical person in that. I do study them and watch them a little more closely than others because one day I would like to make them. And in fact, right now I'm working on my first, which turns out to be a documentary. I never thought in 37 years of being interested in making a film that I would ever want to make a documentary, and yet that seems to be the one that will be the first one. That will be my opening directorial, my opening feature film directorial credit, because technically right now I am already a prize-winning film director of short films. All of that to say hello and welcome to a YouTube channel that I am going to attempt here. I'll call it a YouTube channel because that's where I plan to upload it now, but that plan may change. I may put it on Rumble, or there's a growing number of places where you can put videos. Maybe I'll spread them across all of the platforms and get as many fans as I can. Anyway, I have toyed for a long time with the idea of a channel, a video series about film reviews, not really film reviews though, but just film essays, film discussion. There are a lot of film review sites out there, and as fun as that would be, I want to take a slightly different approach. I want to explore films that I see for specific reasons. So this will not just be, hey, there's a film coming out, I got an advance showing, here's my opinion, you decide if you want to go see it. This is going to be films that have been out, I've seen them, you may have seen them, and what we'll do is talk about some aspect of the production that I find interesting, fascinating, that I just want to talk about. I don't have a lot of in-person friends who want to sit around and talk about films. My wife has given a very valiant effort, but it's just not her thing the way it's my thing. That's just the reality. Okay, so I'm going to give this a shot. I don't have the time to do it like I would like to, which is once a week, because I am trying to make my own film, and so the more time I put into something like this, the more that is a distraction from getting the real dream of life done. So we'll see what happens. I'll tell you my life dream for something like this is to end up in the circle at least once on one of those group chats hosted by people like The Critical Drinker, some of the other critics that I look up to. So hello over there in Scotland. But anyway, no, really, it is just for fun. And if it gets any attention and it does anything for me, hey, great. And if 5 people watch, okay. It's called After the End Credits because it will be a discussion of the film in enough detail that you will want to have seen it first. I will spoil every film that we talk about. Absolutely. Day 1 and my studio is falling apart. Oh, Linda, you fell off the bookshelf. Linda Seeger's Creating Unforgettable Characters, recommended in film school, so I did buy it and get it. I've read this, but I haven't seen a Fellini. Okay, I've given Linda some more tilt, so hopefully she'll stay where she belongs for the course of this video. All of that brings us to the point where it is time to begin discussing today's film. It is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, released in 1988, directed by Terry Gilliam. This is your spoiler alert, and this film is recommended. So if you don't want the film spoiled, I suggest you stop this video now, go find some way to see it. I have no idea if it's streaming anywhere. I happen to have a DVD copy. I have a whole rant about the world switching to streaming and how people are going to lose access to the movies they really want to watch. But anyway, that's another thing. If you are interested in seeing The Adventures of Baron Munchausen unspoiled by the things I'm about to say, which is the way I recommend seeing movies, by the way, see them first and then discuss them. Do it now. This is your chance. This is your official warning. There will be one of these in every episode, and this is it. Terry Gilliam was the one American in the six-person comedy troupe Monty Python's Flying Circus in the 1960s and 1970s over in the United Kingdom. Although he was sometimes in the show and sometimes in the movies, he was mostly off-camera creating the animations for those productions. Later on, he would then direct an entire portion of the Meaning of Life, the opening section called the Crimson Permanent Assurance. He also co-directed Monty Python and the Holy Grail with Terry Jones, until eventually he went off on his own and directed Jabberwocky, which, if I recall, was his first feature film. I have seen it. It was very sophomoric. I saw it because I'm a Terry Gilliam fan, and I eventually found a way to rent it and see it. And I think of everything I've seen of his, that is the film I have the least interest in ever seeing again. He has two prominent themes that he works with. One of them is the theme of fantasy versus reality. I have to wonder how disillusioned he may be with this life, because in almost every one of his films, the person who can escape reality and go live in a fantasy of some kind, somewhere in his mind, is the happier person. The other theme that he is constantly dealing with is bureaucracy, paperwork, government regulations and interventions. Both of these themes really came together in Brazil, which is a film that I'm pretty sure I will discuss, so I won't say much about it here. But those themes do continue in his fourth film, and I'd say his third major one. Time Bandits being the first, and then Brazil, and then The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Those themes do continue. There is fantasy versus reality. There's a little bit of bureaucracy. It's there, but it's not as prevalent at all as it is in Brazil, or would come to be in later films like 12 Monkeys has a government bureaucracy, etc. But this really isn't a discussion about Terry Gilliam's films. It's just kind of an introduction to the man, and then we need to move on. Let's talk specifically about The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which came out in 1988 and was his follow-up to Time Bandits and Brazil. It is considered the third in an unofficial trilogy called the Trilogy of Imagination. Time Bandits deals with a young boy who has a very imaginative way of seeing the world. And then Brazil deals with the middle-aged man who is much more disillusioned with life and relies on fantasy as a way of escaping his very dull, gray, literally gray existence. And then The Adventures of Baron Munchausen is about an old man and how he is getting through life relying on imagination. Let's quickly go through the plot. The film is set in the Age of Reason, and it's set in an unknown town somewhere in Asia Minor, somewhere in not Asia Minor. Yeah, Asia Minor, the Turkish area. And there is a town under attack by a sultan. Within that town, in an attempt to continue to make life livable for the people, there is a theater troupe presided over by Henry Salt. And they are putting on a play called The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. It is a wild, outlandish production based on the tall tales of Baron Munchausen. And there really was a Baron Munchausen, by the way, a 17th century, maybe 18th century cavalry officer in Germany. And I could not discern what the truth was. It's one of two realities. Either he personally was an extreme liar. He would make up tall tales about himself and propagate them, whether for fun or whether everybody knew it was a lie or whether he was honestly trying to impress people. I don't know. That's one side of it. The other side, the other alternate theory that I've read is that a friend of his made up a bunch of tall tales and used his name, used him as the main character. Either way, those stories grew and grew, and eventually many of them became published. One of them became published in a version by a man named Rasp. That's his last name, R-A-S-P-E. Speaking of Rasp, and somewhere in the middle of his own wild imagination and his plans to make films on into the future, Terry Gilliam settled on taking those stories and turning them into a film. In his commentary on the production, he said one of the reasons, or perhaps the key reason, why he chose that subject was he wanted to get people interested in reading classic tales once again. So he took some classic tales and he put them into film form. I have read The Adventures of Baron Munchausen by Rasp, which I bought after falling in love with the film, and this is an instance, an example of the few times where I feel like the film is better than the book. The book was hard to get through. It really started to lag about halfway through. Anyway, in the film, this theater troupe is putting on these tales when all of a sudden an old man shows up claiming to be the real Baron Munchausen. He hijacks the stage and starts telling his version of his life. And for the next half an hour or so, we see what the tale he's telling, where he was a much younger man. He met with the Sultan, the very Sultan who is currently attacking the town, and he wagered the Sultan that he would be able to bring the Sultan a bottle of wine finer than anything the Sultan had ever tasted from a winery in, I believe, Italy, thousands of miles away, and do it within an hour. Unbeknownst to the Sultan, the Baron has 4 very useful servants. One of them is incredibly strong, one of them can run hundreds of miles an hour, one of them can see for hundreds of miles, and one of them can hear for hundreds of miles. And they all put their talents together to enable the Baron to win this bet and bring the Sultan a bottle of wine from thousands of miles away in an hour. Thousands, hundreds, I'm not sure. I'd have to watch it again. I should know that. I've seen it so many times. Anyway, the Baron wins the bet. And in winning the bet, he wins the Sultan's prize, which is to take as much from his treasury as the strongest man can carry. Well, the Baron's 4th servant, the strongest man, is able to carry it all away. He has left the Sultan's treasury absolutely bare. This infuriates the Sultan, and the Sultan begins pursuing him, and it becomes a lifelong pursuit. And that brings us back to the present day, where the old Baron Munchausen is standing in the theater explaining that's why the town is being attacked. The Sultan is trying to get me. He has, in the interim, lost track of all 4 of his servants, and so he must take off and find them. And he takes off with the help of a somewhat skeptical, but somewhat trusting and believing, somewhat incredulous young girl, Henry Salt's daughter. They build a hot air balloon and they take off to the moon. And this is where the film starts to absolutely delight me, because I love fantasy adventures, and I love fantasy adventures that are lighthearted and fun, and they don't stop to burden us with rational explanations. The moon is presided over by a king and queen, and I say presided over, but they seem to be the only 2 life forms there, so there's not much to preside over. They are giants, and their heads are detachable. So their heads can go off and think about intelligent things, and then their bodies can go do more physical activity. The King of the Moon, by the way, is played by Robin Williams in an absurd cameo that is quite amusing. And then after the Baron makes the King of the Moon angry, he seems to have a track record of making people angry, he escapes and he falls off the moon back to Earth with Sally. He has found his first servant. He's found Berthold, the one who can run really fast. They end up in a volcano where they meet Vulcan, the god of war, and his wife Venus. The Baron finds Venus very attractive, which makes Vulcan angry. Vulcan kicks them all out after Baron Munchausen has discovered his second servant, and they end up on the other side of the world in the middle of an ocean where they get swallowed by a whale or a giant sea beast. And in the belly of that whale, they discover the last two of the Baron's servants. So all four are now united. And when they manage to escape the belly of the beast and end up back on the beach where the Sultan is attacking the town, they set about to defeat the Sultan and save the day. It's a little more complicated than that. It does take 2 hours and about 6 minutes to accomplish, but I love this film. Now, none of that is what I really want to talk about. The theme for today, as I said at the beginning, I want to center on one reason for discussing the film. What I want to talk about today is how this film is one of the most outstanding examples of having everything go wrong, but ending up with a film where no one can tell. This is a fine film. It is a beautiful film. It is an intelligent film. It is a lavish film. It is my kind of fantasy film. I do not like films that take place long ago and far away, but they are chintzy. They are cheap. The dialogue is told in modern lingo. As an example of a film I could not stand so much that I couldn't even finish it, the 1980s Dungeons and Dragons with Jeremy Irons and whoever else may have been in it. I was a young person at the time, may have been in my 20s by the time I finally got around to seeing it. I rented it thinking, good, a medieval fantasy adventure full of the magic and the creatures and all of the excitement that is implied in the manuals and books of the old role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons. And 10 minutes into it, I was hating it because it had two young boys, who were talking in modern English, modern dialogue. The mood was spoiled. Not to mention the acting was overacting, either overacting or bad acting. The sets, the lighting, everything just said, we're making a joke out of this thing. Similar with Ella Enchanted, starring Anne Hathaway. I understand from my wife that it's actually quite a charming book, but they chose to turn everybody in it. They chose to try to make it relevant to 90s teens. So everybody was talking in modern English. They were modern people in medieval costumes. And I just despise that. I love Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings took itself completely seriously. So I say all of that to praise it up and down. When you sit and watch the film, as I got to do in a theater in 1989 when it got its United States release, you can't tell that this film is one of the top, if not the top, example of a Hollywood debacle. Look up debacle in the dictionary, and the movie poster for The Adventures of Baron Munchausen may be there. It went wrong before cameras even rolled. I think the only time a film has gone more wrong for Terry Gilliam was when he first tried to make The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, which never, in its original form, never made it to theaters. He did finally, decades later, get a version of it into theaters, but it was not the film he originally intended to make. It was that's got a whole. There is an entire documentary called Lost in La Mancha about how that film, filmed for 4 days, maybe 5, and then it was done. The production was done. There was no film to be seen. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen at least made it to theaters, but not before blowing through tens of millions of dollars more than what Columbia Pictures had originally hoped. The troubles included, among other things, a producer who apparently was not really a very good producer. Depending on who exactly is telling the truth, he may have even been in it just to soak up a paycheck and had no idea what he was doing. Many of the troubles came from shooting in Italy, where they have a culture of basically requiring bribes. The costumes were made in America and flown to Italy, and they were held up in customs until the production company paid up. Many times, trying to get from hotels to the sets, the taxi drivers would go no further until they were given additional money beyond the actual quoted rates of traveling as far as they were traveling. One after another, there were little holdups like that. The film itself was huge. I don't remember the precise numbers, but somewhere around 20 to 25 million was promised. And many people read through the script and looked at Terry and said, this is not a $25 million film. You're never going to get it finished with this amount of money. And they were right. The film ran out of money completely after they had started shooting. There was about a 2-week hiatus where the fate of the film was up in the air completely. Nobody quite knew, was it going to get finished or not? They did finally secure additional funding, and the fact that the film exists means that they did finish it. It did require a rewrite. The scene on the moon was going to have many people, many giant people, and when the budget kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, Terry rewrote it so that it only involved 2 people. It meant changing the entire personality of the king such that he was no longer a noble and dignified person. He was originally going to be played by Sean Connery, who had had an appearance in Time Bandits as well. Sean had approved of his role in the original. When Terry rewrote it, either Sean backed out or Terry said this part is no longer right for you. In the end, it was Eric Idle, who plays Berthold, who suggested Robin Williams. Eric and Robin were apparently friends, and Robin was brought in to play the King of the Moon. Incidentally, it was either Robin Williams or his agent, I've heard varying accounts of this, who said, you can't use Robin Williams' name. We don't want you just... We want to know that you're not bringing Robin in just to make headlines. And so if you read the end credits to the film, it says the King of the Moon was played by Re di Tutto, which is a play on the Latin phrase re di tutto, which the King of the Moon actually uses in the film. One after another, things just went wrong over and over and over again. Sometimes it was weather. Had a massive hot air balloon was supposed to be floating over the city. Out of shot, it was held in place by a crane, but the wind kept blowing the ship so that it was not facing the right direction. It didn't look like it was sailing gracefully, so hours were lost one day for that. Makeup department, well, not the makeup department's fault, but there was one day where John Neville, who plays Baron Munchausen, spent 3 to 4 hours in the makeup chair, only to discover that they had put the wrong makeup on him when he went out to shoot. Because over the course of the film, he plays anything from about probably late 30s to somewhere in his 80s. And so they had to have old age makeup and young age makeup, and they put the wrong makeup on one day. And there went his day. Incidentally, the film took so long, John Neville was worried that he would miss his deadline for getting back to his work at the Canadian Shakespeare or something. He was head of it, he was president of it, and he was supposed to be running it. He had managed to secure time off to be in the film based on the original schedule for how the film would go. So one thing after another, this film was falling apart fast. And it's a huge film. It is massive. I'm 50. I know how films are made. I've made some short ones. I'm working on a documentary. But if someone came along to me and said, do you want to make a film as big as The Adventures of Baron Munchausen? I'd say, that frightens me. Terry obviously had very capable production manager, assistant director. Despite what I've said about his questionable producer, he apparently was surrounded by very confident people who could wrangle all of these details, these huge sets, hordes of people, and get it all done. And as I've said, they got it done. And if you watch it, you cannot tell that it is a black spot on Columbia's ledgers. Part of the problem, part of the reason that it flopped miserably, is that while it was in production, Columbia had a revolution in their administration. Their executives got overhauled. There was a new head of Columbia. When anytime there's a new head, they kick people out and they bring in new people. And the new administration had no idea why anybody greenlit this film, and they had no interest really in following up. They released it in a pathetic number of theaters. And I know for myself, my dad had to drive me and a friend a good 40 minutes to get to a theater that was showing it. And that was living in New York, where there's theaters everywhere. If there's something to be said about the making of the Adventures of Baron Munchausen, it is that in the end, Terry and his crew crafted a film that shows no cracks in its surface. It does not for a moment say, we really almost died on this thing. We really almost dropped the ball. This film almost didn't exist. It doesn't show. Which is fascinating to me because everything works so well. I have to stop and dwell on films nowadays. We have films being made now in 2024, 2025, or coming out now, made with 4, 5, 6 times the budget, 7 times the budget, 8 times the budget. Yeah. And they're a mess. The script is incoherent. You can tell that there were reshoots. You can tell that this thing was the victim of multiple executives all trying to have their fingers in the pie. Everybody pulling on strings in different directions. Egos flaring. Nobody really deciding what tone they want. I think of, was it Justice League or Batman vs. Superman? I think it was Justice League, by Zack Snyder, and then Zack Snyder couldn't finish it, so Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon, and the film is uneven and a little bit weird. And that's just one example. Almost anything Marvel has put out in the last 5 years. What a mess. I have a hard time going to movies anymore because there's so few movies where they really are finished, and they're finished with care, and they're finished with excellence, and they've been put together beautifully. Here's a film that went over budget, doubling its original budget, executives at Columbia hating it, everything going wrong during the production, but they got it done, and they got it done so well that it looks like everything went just fine. That's impressive. And that's the thought that comes to my mind. Other films, I could talk about themes. I could talk about, in fact, I know when I talk about Brazil that I will be talking about a particular theme that runs through it. If I talk about anything by Edgar Wright, I will be talking about his attention to detail in making every moment count. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen as a film is just a fun film. It's fun. It's fun, and I said it's lavish. I enjoy it. I love it. But to dissect the film and to try to find deep meanings and things for me to eloquently, talk out loud about, I can't. I said eloquently, and then I couldn't think of a word. It's not one of those films. It's just a for fun film, and it is fun. And I highly recommend it. So today's discussion was just how amazing it is that it feels so flawless. And then you read about it. I will leave you with this. If you are interested in reading about just how bad everything went, see if I can get it without a glare. Losing the Light by Andrew Yule, Terry Gilliam, and the Munchausen Saga. This is a fascinating read on how a film can go so wrong and still get done, and get done so well. All right, that was my opening attempt. I think future episodes will be a little more interesting. I will have notes The Critical Drinker actually recommends writing out a script. I'm not sure I'm that kind of person. I'm more of an improv, contemporaneous speaker, but I will formulate my thoughts a little better. I want to get this one out on the deadline, and I hope you'll tune in for after the end credits. I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you care to like and subscribe and click the bell and all the stuff that you do on YouTube or whatever other platform I load this onto, great. Leave a comment if you'd like to, and if you want to round up more friends and if we can get this into thousands and tens of thousands of viewers and I can make a living doing this, that would be sweet. It would also help fund the film I'm working on. Have a great day.